Gentlemen, and first of all, I would like to thank the Institute of the Americas, and in particular Jeremy Martin, for inviting me to join you this afternoon to talk to you about an update of the implementation of Mexico's energy reform, and in particular, I'm going to concentrate my remarks on the upstream side of the implementation. Okay, let's go to the first slide, please. And just a quick reminder, as you know, President Peña Nieto presented a all-comprehensive constitutional reform in 2013, which was approved by Congress in December. We amended 3 key articles of our Constitution. And I would like to stress a couple of things. The first one is that in Mexico's constitution, we maintain that hydrocarbons in the subsoil belong to the nation. I always like to stress this because this is, of course, different from the system that you have in the United States. But what the constitutional amendment allows for is for the state to bid oil contracts. So now we can have 2 types of actors. We can have assignments that are granted to PEMEX, and we actually conducted something that we call Round Zero, in which we granted PEMEX 83% of Mexico's 2P reserves and 21% of its prospective resources, giving it a base to maintain a production of 2.5 million barrels a day over the next 20 years and a half. And then the rest, what we kept, the resources that we kept, are basically being bid through different rounds to international companies. We can have both, of course. PEMEX can also participate in these bids. And the idea is to be able to have new players come in and help us increase our oil and gas production. Of course, this competitive new system entails the strengthening of regulatory bodies, and in this regard, both the CNH, which is the National Hydrocarbon Commission in charge of the upstream, was strengthened. It has 7 commissioners that are proposed by the government, but by the president, ratified by Congress. And we also have the Energy Regulatory Commission. In addition to that, we have also a newly created body, which is the National Agency for Industrial Safety and Environmental Protection of the hydrocarbon sector, which is really important in terms of maintaining this balance between the regulator that is moving forward in the bid and the regulator who is making sure that these activities are conducted in a safe and sound manner. Another very important change that we established from the Constitution is the establishment of the Mexican Petroleum Fund. This petroleum fund is hosted within the Mexican Central Bank, which, as you know, is an autonomous body, and it is in charge of receiving all the revenue that comes out of oil activity, whether it is done by PEMEX or by the new companies, and it is in charge also of making the payments to the contractors. And what is important about this is that we have full transparency, so everybody can go to the webpage of the Mexican Petroleum Fund and see what oil revenues the Mexican state is receiving, and of course how we are using them. So let me move on to the next slide, and I will concentrate rapidly about where we are in terms of the implementation of Round 1. Just as a reminder, the constitutional reform allows for different types of contracts. Concessions are banned in Mexico, but we can have license contracts, production sharing contracts, profit sharing contracts, and of course we maintain service contracts. For the first bid, which is the exploration block in shallow waters, the bidding date was July 15th. For this type of fields, of areas, we selected production sharing contracts. We bidded 14 blocks. 2 of them were awarded, and actually the same company won both bids. It's a consortium in which we have Talos Energy, which is a U.S. operator, and we have Premier Oil from the UK and Sierra Oil and Gas, which is a newly created company based in Mexico. And it's actually really interesting because we have Mexican funds within this newly created company, but we also have Mexican petroleum engineers and geologists, as well as some that come from other parts of the world. As a matter of fact, the CEO of this company comes from Venezuela. So it's interesting to see how we're beginning to have new players. We go to the next slide, please. In the second bid, which took place only a month ago on September 30th, this was seen as a very successful bid because we were able to award 60% of the contracts, that is 3 out of the 5 contracts that we bid. And what was interesting about this is that we bid 9 fields, 8 of which had certified 1P reserve. All in all, we awarded 6 fields, so we are expecting to have production coming out of these fields by the end of this administration. And in the first case, the first contract was awarded to Eni International, which, as you know, is an Italian oil company. The second contract was awarded to a consortium formed by Pan American and E&P Hydrocarbon y Servicios. I like to point out that Pan American is a consortium formed by Brida from Argentina and BP, which is, of course, one of the major companies. And then in the case of the last contract, it was awarded to Fieldwood, which is the operator from the United States, and Petroval, which is the new affiliated company from Grupo Val of Mexico, which is entering now the oil and gas sector. This is Grupo Val has been in the retail market as well as in the mining sector, among others. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we are already beginning to see fundamental things in Mexico. And the first thing I'd like to stress is that all of these bids are conducted with full transparency. I'm sure that some of you did follow them through internet, and if not, I do invite you to follow the bidding date through the webpage of www.rondauno.gov.mx because it's actually a really innovative process that we are conducting here in Mexico in terms of how we are doing all this work in a very transparent manner. The second thing is that September 4th, we signed the first 2 contracts, and in that regard, we are really having a new era starting in Mexico, in which now we have we have operators other than PEMEX working in Mexico. The other thing is that the contracts that we are defining really look for having a balance between what making them attractive to the investors, but at the same time making sure that these contracts are attractive for the state and that have a long-term viability. And in this regard, one of the things that I would like to stress about the contracts that have been awarded is that in terms of the returns to the government, the returns have been very, very high. So let me go to the next slide. And here, what I like to comment is that precisely what I just mentioned, that we've been having a system where we have checks and balance in terms of the definition of the contract. So the contract is designed by CNET, and that is by the Ministry of Energy or the Department of Energy of Mexico. And the Finance Ministry provides the fiscal terms. We also here at CNET, we design the terms of the bid, the terms and conditions of the bid. Once we have the entire package, we pass it on to the regulator, to CNH, the upstream regulator, which is in charge of conducting the bidding process. And one of the things that has helped us throughout the whole process, I would say, probably from the design of the reform through now in implementation, but particularly with regard to the contracts, is that we've been having a close dialogue between the government and the private sector. So, for instance, we've been having conversations with the chambers, the business chambers, and now there is a newly created association of oil-producing companies here in Mexico, with which we have had a dialogue and feedback about the terms and conditions of these contracts. So I like to point out three key issues that they have stressed to us. One has to do with the legal conditions, and in part, companies have had concerns about the concept of administrative rescission, which is written into the law in Mexico. We have drafted the contracts in such a way that we give assurances to the companies that this is not a decision of a single person, and that there is a procedure, a prior procedure before even beginning the administrative rescission, to guarantee that there is a full dialogue, technical dialogue between the contractor and the regulator. In addition to that, another concern that companies had to do with the guarantees, and of course we've been making all of adjustments to the different guarantees established in the contract. Regarding fiscal terms, one of the things that has helped us be more successful in the second bid is that we disclosed, prior to the bid, we disclosed the minimum bidding value. And this was important because in the first bid, we had at least 4 contracts that were not awarded because the value that was offered was just a little bit below the minimum established by the state. And the other thing that we've been working on is minimizing red tape, making sure that we have just the right number of reports needed by the regulator and by the government in order for the companies to be able to reduce bureaucratic procedure and get to the work, to the business of production. We can go to the next slide, please. In terms of the contracts, as I mentioned, we have different type of contracts, and for the first and second bid, we have the production sharing contracts, and now we have for the third bid and for the upcoming bid, the fourth bid, the license contract. Of course, this has differences in terms of the payments, in terms of the production sharing contract. The award variable is basically a percentage of the operative utility, that is the total income minus the recoverable cost minus the royalties and additional investment commitments. And it's payment that is done in kind. And of course, there is a mechanism of cost recovery. And one of the things that is important that we established to make sure that we have a long-term viability of the contracts is that we included an adjustment mechanism based on profitability. And why did we include this? Well, right now, for instance, we have low oil prices. If the prices of oil go again up to, let's say, $100, which of course we're not foreseeing in the very short term, but could eventually happen, we have a mechanism through which the state can capture some of these oil revenues. Also, if the field turns out to be extremely profitable, we have this mechanism, and this is something that we did in order to ensure the long-term viability of the contract. In terms of the licenses, I like to underline again that this is not a concession. And part of the challenge in defining the license, the terms of the license, is to make sure that it is clear that it is not a concession, that it is a license. And so a lot of the contents of these licenses are already established in the law on hydrocarbon income. So of course, in a license, there are most of the revenue for the state is based on royalties. Let me go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the upcoming bid is the third bid, which is basically 25 bidding areas, the 25 fields in onshore. And these are smaller fields, with the exception of 4 larger fields. These are really smaller fields. They're mostly mature fields, although some of them are actually quite interesting because these were fields that were closed early on when, for instance, Cantarell was discovered, and it was more profitable for PEMEX to invest in Cantarell than to maintain these fields. What is interesting about this bid is that we designed the requirements for participating in this bid not in terms of having to be qualified as a company, but to be qualified as a team. And the idea is basically to plant the seed for having the emergence of new Mexican companies. So right now we have 59 companies that have registered for pre-qualification, and 39 of them are Mexican companies. And we are currently also in the process, CNH is in the process of bringing interested companies to visit the areas and get more information about the fields that will be bid on December 15th. Next slide, please. So one of the most awaited bid is the fourth bid. This is the bid for deep water, and I would almost say ultra deep water and extra heavy crude. You can see the big blocks. Of course, we're going to be having smaller blocks in the bid, but these are the areas that we were going to be bidding in the Perdido area and in the Sabina, in the Southern Basin. And in the first case, in the Perdido area, this is an area where there is more information, and of course there is a lot of activity on the US side. In the Southern Basin is an area that is more of a frontier area. In both cases, we have white azimuth seismic, and we have cubic seismic, so this is already available for interested companies to purchase from CNH. And in addition to that, we're working on the model. We are very likely going to go for a license contract, and we will be presenting this bid in the fall of this year, so in the next few weeks. As for the extra heavy crude, what is interesting is what you can see in the chart, in the map in pink. What is interesting about the contracts that we will be presenting there is that we have 2 giant fields, and they are next to 3 fields that PEMEX is going to be bidding for a farm out. This is a real challenge in terms of producing them or transporting them, because it's crude that goes between 8 to 13 degrees API. It's in shallow waters, and it has important concentrations of sulfuric acid. Let me go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the round 1, which is basically what we are doing on the side of the state, with the areas that stayed on the side of the state. But the reform also gave PEMEX a lot of new tools, and part of these tools means that PEMEX can look for partners and work with partners, either technological partners or financial partners, to continue its activity. So PEMEX has already announced, and it has presented to us several fields that they want to migrate from entitlements to the new type of contracts and look for partners. So we will be presenting these migrations in November, and they include at least 2 contracts in shallow waters, at least 4 contracts onshore, 1 contract that I already mentioned in extra heavy crude, which has 3 fields, and in addition another contract with deep water fields with that have natural gas. We are waiting for their proposal for the fields that they want to migrate in the Perdido area. But we know that is also coming, and we will be bidding that at the same time with our fourth bid. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I would like to also rapidly mention that the reform allows for the migration of contracts that came out of the 2008 reform and 2005 PECOS and the CS And these are basically the idea here is that the current contractor of PEMEX can become a partner of PEMEX through the migration of an entitlement of this contract to the new type of contract. We have been working on this for close to a year, and we're reaching the point where we're almost able to announce a couple of migrations. This has taken a little bit longer than we expected because we needed to make sure that there was materiality and that we complied with the law in the sense of being able to show that there was an increase in production, an increase in the restitutional reserve, as well as that the government was going to get the same revenue in terms of fiscal returns. Can we go to the next one, please? One important thing that we've been working on is 5-year plans, and we've been doing this for pipelines, for natural gas pipelines, but we also have been doing this for exploration and production. And just last week we presented the final result of our 5-year plan. What I like to underline about the 5-year plan is that we start with the proposal that CNH presented from a completely technical point of view. Then we work through it here at CENER, looking at policy issues, and we then decided to present it for getting feedback from industry and from local governments. So we did this through several instruments. First of all, we had surveys that could be accessed through internet, where we got a lot of feedback from local, state, and industry. Then we conducted one-to-one sessions with industry, where we got feedback, technical feedback, as well as nominations. This is a procedure that is allowed for in Mexican law, and it's also a very common procedure in industry, where we sign confidentiality agreements and get the nominations. And finally, we went back to CNH and looked at all the technical information, seismic data, to make sure that the definition that we were making of the areas was the most appropriate. So can we go to the next one, please? So this is the result that we got. This is the map of our 5-year plan, 2015-2019. It includes round 1, which we are already implementing. It has 4 bids that we will be doing over the next 5 years. And you can access this through the web page that is below the map. Of course, you would have this presentation, you would have access to this presentation. I do invite you to look at the entire report, because then you can see area by area what we will be bidding or what we plan to bid. And in addition to that, I like to stress that all companies can present their nominations in the first semester of the year, and in the in the third quarter of the year, we will be presenting the proposal of what we will be bidding the next year. So we already did that for 2016, but if you are interested, you can nominate areas in the spring of 2016, and in the fall of 2016, we will be announcing what we will be bidding in 2017, based on, of course, on the 5-year plan. We can go to the next slide, please. So one of the elements that is included since the Constitution in the energy reform is the local content requirement. The law establishes that we have to go from an average of 25% by 2015 to 35% by 2025. And the methodology to measure local content requirement in Mexico includes technological transfer, human resource development, construction work, goods and services, and the development of infrastructure. One thing that I'd like to comment is that local content requirement is not just about a number. It goes hand in hand with the government strategy to move forward in the development of a fully comprehensive strategy to develop local and regional value chains. And the idea basically is to make sure that Mexico becomes a platform for producing goods and services for the energy industry, not only in Mexico, but worldwide. We've been very successful to do that in the automobile industry, in the aeronautical industry, and this is what we aim at doing in the energy sector. For that regard, we have an advisory council in which industry, government, and academia have a continuous dialogue. We have funds, specific funds for research and technological development, as well as for human capital formation. Next slide, please. Also, from the Constitution, we inscribe in Article 25 of the Constitution the concept of sustainability. And here we understand sustainability in the widest sense. That is, we understand sustainability from the economic sense, the environmental sense, but also the social sense, with a strict respect for human rights. And as a part of this, we in the hydrocarbons law, as well as in the electricity law, the concept of a social impact study. The government has to conduct a social impact study prior to selecting the areas that it will be putting in the bid. And then when the contractor is awarded a contract, they have to conduct a social impact evaluation in which they have to define the strategy to mitigate the impact on the area. Also, the chapter that on social impact in the hydrocarbons law includes the whole process for negotiating the benefits for the community, as well as for the payments that will be granted to the owners of the land. In addition to that, we have as a requirement that in the areas where we have indigenous communities, we have to conduct the free and informed prior consultation, which is an obligation that Mexico has since it is a member of the it's a party of 169 Convention of the International Labour Organization. Next one, please. And finally, I'd like to mention that transparency and accountability is also a key concept that is written throughout the reform, since the Constitution down to all the laws that were published, to the way we are doing our job. And this is not just, I would like to underline, this is not just a word, a nice fancy word that we like to use. You can see it in the implementation, for instance, in the way that we have a weight and balance way of designing the contract, in the way that anybody who wants in any part of the world can download at no cost the contracts, the terms and conditions, know right away who is being pre-qualified, and also follow the way we are awarding the contracts. By the way, the contracts are awarded through an economic variable, so there is no room for negotiations. It's basically whomever has the best offer for the state. In addition to that, regulators, their sessions are conducted publicly. You can follow them through internet as well. They cannot have a one-to-one meeting with a commissioner. They have to have at least two commissioners in the room, and they have to make public the minute of the meeting. And finally, all the revenues, as I already mentioned, of all revenues can be seen in the webpage of the Mexican Petroleum Fund. In addition to that, Mexico is a member of the Open Government Partnership, and as a matter of fact, just this week and yesterday and today, we've been having this summit here in Mexico. And part of the commitments that Mexico established through the Open Government Partnership is to present its candidacy to EITI, which is, as you know, is a standard for transparency in the extractive industry. We are working on that. The government has already made the announcement that it is committed to do so. We are working with the creation of the multi-party group, which includes civil society, government, and the industry. And I am very happy and very honored to have been named the national coordinator for this process. And we are hoping to present our candidacy in February of next year. So I would leave it at this for today. And of course, I'm open to all your questions, but I do invite you if we can go to the next page, and to invite you to visit our website. There are several websites that are listed throughout the presentation, but mostly ronda1.gov.mx for anything that has to do with the government bids, and the webpage of CENER for any additional information, the 5-year plan in exploration and production, the 5-year plan in pipelines. We're going to be coming up also with a pipeline, with a 5-year plan for other needed infrastructure. But you can also look through this webpage at opportunities in the electricity sector. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you very much, and apologies on the volume situation. But look, we got through it, and there's a heck of a lot of good information. We really appreciate you taking the time to walk through all of this with us. And congratulations again to you and everyone in Mexico, CNH, Hacienda, for all the work you've done and continue to do. Folks have started to put questions into the chat box, and Lourdes, let me just start really quickly as I start to read these. But and congratulations, by the way. I wanted to ask you about the EITI and the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. So congratulations for the progress on that. That's important, and I think everyone's appreciative of that. Real quickly, and then I'll get some of these other questions, but first I want to start on deep water. And you said something along the lines of the next few weeks is when I think folks can expect, or when we can expect to see some announcements. Is there anything more? Can you share a little bit more on the deep water opportunity and bidding, not just timeline, but some of the other particulars at this stage?
Well, let me comment this. Everybody expected.
I'm sorry. Yeah, could you move a little bit closer to the mic?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's good.
Okay. Everybody expected, and we actually expected to come out with the 4 bids much earlier. But what happened is that after the first bid, we started looking at, analyzing and trying to understand why we were not as successful as we had expected. And another thing that happened was that at the same time, we presented this 5-year plan that, as I mentioned, we submitted for feedback from industry and from local government. And we got so much feedback that it really enriched our decision-making process. So basically, and to be very blunt, we basically threw out what we had, and we had to start anew, again, from scratch with the whole thing. So, for instance, in terms of the areas, originally we had chosen very small blocks, and companies were very clear that for deep water, still talking of areas that are between 2,000 and 3,500 meters depth before you can actually start drilling. They said, well, if you are going to put small blocks, nobody's going to be interested. We really need bigger blocks. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because of course you have the major companies. The big companies, they want huge blocks. But there are smaller companies that have been extremely successful working in deep water on the US side, for instance, or perhaps in the west coast of Africa. And that said to us, look, if you put huge blocks, we will not be able to participate. So we really need to strike the balance between making sure that we have competition, that we have the companies that will be able to qualify and that will be interested in working in this area. So what you will see is a mix. We will have bigger blocks and we will have smaller blocks. But also the other thing is, some companies said to us, well, look, we're interested in areas that are in 3,500 meters of depth. And a lot of companies said, look, that's really in the technological frontier. So if you put that out, there's only one or perhaps two companies that will be able to bid. So we moved a little bit to to more shallow water. So what you will see is a menu in which we have bigger blocks, but with diverse sizes, where we did not just concentrate on the ultra deep, but we have also deep areas, and also we kept some frontier areas, because that's another thing that came out of the survey that we found actually fascinating. That is that companies are really interested in going to the frontier areas and explore them. The other thing that we did is we looked at the seismic data. This is something that was highly criticized in the first bid. And it turns out that Mexico does have some wide azimuth seismic data that is quite recent. And we selected areas that are precisely where we have these wide azimuth seismic cubes. So a lot of the blocks will have really good information. The other thing is we work some more with the contract. So we have been working and trying to, improve the most we could our production sharing contract. Industry has been, stressing the importance of having a license contract for this type of really challenging areas where you have a lot of risk. So basically, we've been moving towards preferring a license contract and trying to define a license contract. So it's been a lot of work, and this is part of the reason why, we haven't come out as fast as it was expected. But I think when we come out, what we are aiming at is to make sure that we have a contract that is really considering the interest of the state, protecting the interest of the state, but that we are really competitive at the same time. As you know, there are a lot of other countries, putting areas for bid. It's a very competitive environment at this time, in which, on top of it, participants have important financial restraints due to the current levels of oil prices.
No, thank you. Appreciate the very candid and informative answer in terms of sort of the process, and how you all have been working on the deep water. And you're right, we were in Rio last week, and I have to tell you, folks in Rio were, after having a not so successful round a couple of weeks ago, they were referencing Mexico and how Mexico made adjustments between July 15th and September 30th. And so I have to tell you, folks in Rio were very optimistic about what's going on in Mexico vis-a-vis what's going on in Brazil. So keep that in mind. It's always an interesting perspective when you go somewhere else. Let me move on. There's a bunch of other questions, and unfortunately we're running out of time. If you could talk a little bit about the farm outs. There's a couple of questions, but talk a little about the timing, and will those be occurring at the same time as the deep water round? How do you envision the timing and when things move forward on the farm out process?
Sure. Well, first of all, a very quick reminder, even though Mexico's reform followed most closely that it could international best practice for the farm out, Congress decided that they wanted to have a bidding process, a transparent bidding process that is conducted by CNH. So in this case, it's not a one-on-one negotiation with PEMEX, but basically PEMEX requests that they tell the CNR that they want to migrate an entitlement to a new type of contract. We define the contract. We present to them what we think should be the pre-qualification requirements, and then PEMEX just has to be very clear to us about some of the key elements that they want to make sure they have in the partners that they're looking for, including things such as who's going to be the operator, what percentage of the contract they're going to keep, etc. So we've been working on this, and the data rooms are already ready to be open. We've been moving, I think we're very close to be able to present at least the shallow waters, the onshore bits. We will indeed present, I think that will see at the same time that we present the bid for our extra heavy contracts, just because we think that for those extra heavy crudes, there are true synergies, and whomever will be interested in becoming a partner with of PEMEX in the farm out would probably be interested also in becoming a partner of PEMEX in participating in one of the bids. And then we will have the ultra deep water also at the same time. So what, in terms of the time frame, it could be the case that we come out first with some of the farm outs, but in any event, the most expected ones, which are the extra heavy crudes and the deep water, those will be presented at the same time that we present the round one bid, the fourth bid of the round one.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Let me ask you a very specific question, and then I'll roll up a bunch of questions into one final question. The very specific question is, could you clarify or give further definition to how you in Mexico are defining deep water? Is it conventional 500 feet and deeper? What is the definition that you are using?
It's a very good question. I think the standard definition is 500 meters plus. In reality, what you will see in what we will be bidding is that it's really ultra deep water. We're talking really of ultra deep water. We're talking of areas that are, I think the one that is in the most shallow water is around 1,500 meters up to 3,500 meters. So it's really, it's really ultra deep water. One of the things that was really interesting about the 5-year plan and the response that we got from companies is that they suggested to us that instead of starting with the really ultra deep water, we should start from areas that are closer to the coast and start moving towards the ultra deep water, which of course is something that makes absolute sense. And you will see that adjustment that has already been made in the 5-year plan.
Excellent. Let me. I'm trying to get as many of the questions together as possible. I think one thing that I want to make sure and ask you about is another specific question, and then I'll do my sort of joint question. When will the announcement of the economic terms, the Hacienda economic minimums, be made for the third tender?
We haven't decided that yet. This is something that we're still talking with our colleagues in Hacienda. As a matter of fact, today we have a meeting with them, so we will be announcing that shortly. But as you know, the bidding date is December 15th.
Right.
So it should be at least a few days, a few weeks beforehand.
It's similar to what you did with, I think it was it 15 days in September?
It was, it was September 14th, and the bid was September 30th.
Right. So here's my closing question, Lourdes. And again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and it's always a pleasure to hear from you and share comments and questions and insights. So a variety of things that I'll roll up into sort of a future question. And what I mean by that is you talked about 4 bid rounds in the 5-year plan. Obviously, at one point when round 1 started a year and a half ago, we were looking at a 4th tender, a 5th tender on unconventionals. There maybe is a potential new shallow water round. Give us, if you could, sort of what's going to happen in terms of the 4 bid rounds that you see as the 5-year plan. What happens with unconventional bidding going forward? Is there going to be another shallow water round that takes the place perhaps of the unconventional round at the end of round 1? And then the final piece of that, looking forward, is what are the plans, or what do you intend to do at the end of round 1 with all of the blocks that were not adjudicated? I know that's a lot of pieces, but let's just call it a big look forward as to beyond round 1, at the end of round 1, what you envision for investment opportunities.
Okay. Well, your last question is one that is often asked, and basically, whatever is not awarded, it remains in the hands of the state. So anything that is not awarded in the bid, basically we can put it up in another bid in the future. And part of what my team is doing is we're looking at the different areas and trying to understand why some areas were not of interest to participants. Perhaps it has to do with something, with some of the rules that we had for participating in the bid, but perhaps it had to do with the size of the block or the geology, the materiality, etc. So we're going to be reviewing all the information and trying to see in which way we can make this area more attractive. So what you will probably see in the future is that some of these areas are put up for bid again, perhaps in a different arrangement that you will likely see them. And I cannot tell you now when that will happen, because we could decide to do that in round 2, or perhaps in round 4, or perhaps later on. So we have that flexibility, but everything remains in the hands of the state. Then regarding the fifth bid of the round 1, we haven't yet decided what exactly we're going to put in that fifth bid. And part of the reason is we had decided that unconventionals were not economically viable. There will be no interest just because the price of natural gas in particular is so low, and the price of oil is so low, and that we didn't see the numbers being there for making these interesting for investors. But now what was surprised us when we got the feedback from the 5-year plan is that when companies put up their preferences, the 2 key preferences of companies are ultra-deep water and unconventional. And this is something that really surprised us. So we are reconsidering, and we're looking at what kind of opportunities we could think of putting in a round that in a bid that perhaps is a mixed bid. Perhaps we put some unconventionals and some conventionals, So we still haven't made up our mind. But if you look at the 5-year plan, we do consider unconventional, and we are working hard with ASEA, which is the Agency for Industrial Safety and Environmental Protection, to make sure that we have the appropriate regulation for producing unconventional resources.
Perfect. No, that's a so I guess the point is that the fifth round, or excuse me, the fifth tender bid of round 1 is still something that the government is evaluating and figuring out exactly how you want to manage that.
Exactly. We want to first of all finish round 4, finish the farm out, and then we can get to the next stage. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, look, we're running out of time. I don't want to keep you, but I would like to offer you, and I know that you are always, in your office is open, and you talked about all the consultations and feedback. So just a reminder to everyone participating today, number 1, we'll have this downloaded and available in hard copy and audio, but also I know that Dr. Melgar and her staff and her office are always extremely open and welcoming to additional comments and questions via the different websites, via contacts directly with them. So thank you for being so open and receptive to feedback. I'll give you any final comments, Lourdes, in terms of what you see. Obviously the oil price issue is still something that's hovering over all of us. But any final thoughts?
A couple of things. First of all, of course, Jeremy, thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you everyone for listening. I really apologize about the problems we had initially to be able to have the communication, but I did see that there were a lot of people sending messages through the chat, so I'll have my team go over these and be able to send you the answers to your questions. And of course, you can you will have access to this presentation, and we're looking forward for the event here in Mexico on November 18th that the Institute is organizing as well. And it's hard to finish with a final thought, about everything, oil prices and all of that. I think we are living very interesting times, and we're very fortunate to have this opportunity to be part of this very important reform that President Peña Nieto pushed forward. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, and thank you to you, and again, congratulations and continued success to you and everyone at SENER, and of course at the other parts of the government so involved in this, CNH and the Ministry of Finance. So thank you all so much, and with that, we'll wrap up today's webinar. Thanks again to Lourdes Melgar. Thanks to everyone for joining us, our sponsor, Intercap Energy Systems. And we'll see you either online next week to discuss the momentous election in Argentina and what it means for energy. And more importantly for this crowd, see you in person in Mexico City on November 18th to pick up on a lot of these discussions. And we appreciate Sener's support of that event coming up in November. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Halloween to anyone who heading out trick-or-treating this weekend. We'll see you here online or in person soon. Thank you.